Hi, welcome back to Testing Ain't Easy. I'm Mark Skoskevich from My Guru, and this is my colleague, Stefan.
Howdy, folks.
So today, I wanted to spend some time talking about a bit of a different topic than in our last few podcast episodes. Was checking around the latest information that MBA.com or the GMAC provides around preparing for the GMAT. So that's one of the tests that we do a lot of tutoring for here over at My Guru. And I came across a link for a 6-week study plan that they offered. And I just wanted to have a conversation with Stefan about the reasonableness and the feasibility of studying for the GMAT in 6 weeks. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about the GMAT specifically today, but you could imagine a lot of the things we talk about are applicable to the other standardized tests that people need to take, the SAT, the ACT, the LSAT, what have you. So at first you open, and those of you that are watching this as a video, you can download this 6-week study plan. And I think on the surface, I had a few thoughts before I turn it over to Stefan to react to my thoughts. But on the surface, I say to myself, okay, six weeks is, it's a little, I would probably call it a little fast in terms of how much time it would take to do a good job of studying for the GMAT, but nothing too crazy, probably goes a little bit beyond what I might call cramming, but maybe not as much time as I would recommend. And then I'm looking at the study plan itself and thinking, okay, for somebody who is trying to self-study, their bias is not to take a course or hire a tutor yet. They're not quite sure where to start. Okay, this is pretty good. It provides some structure to work from. So I think that's good. But then it was interesting as we started reading the recommendations themselves, Stefan and I just noticed it seemed like there was a lot of practice exams being recommended in the document, and the sort of the guidance around the practice was pretty high, pretty high level. So, complete more practice questions based on your results. And so, for us as a tutoring company, I feel like it ends up actually being a nice, a nice way for somebody to get into it and be like, oh my gosh, I actually can't self-study just with this. I might actually need to get some help because I need the details of exactly how to practice and what to practice. So, so I felt like, good idea. 6 weeks, probably not actually quite enough to do well and prepare for the GMAT. And maybe when you dig into it, the study planner is a little bit too high level. Those are my takeaways. I don't know, Stefan, what were yours? I think you were a little bit more critical than I was.
Yeah, we can blame that on me being French. But I think my issue with it is the source more than anything else. If this came from us, or we'll pick on Scott over at Target Test Prep or any of those other resources that are out there, I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll believe it. But again, this is coming from the official test maker. And the opening statement here says, prepare for the GMAT in only 6 weeks. It makes it seem like it's going to be easy. And what's the title of this podcast? Testing ain't easy. There's a reason for that. You don't want to set an expectation for your test-taking population that you can do this in 6 weeks and it's going to go great. It's going to be fantastic. There's not a problem. Oh, by the way, we didn't actually even mention in this document, and I don't mean to impugn any of our friends over at the GMAC if they're watching or listening to this stuff. I understand the job that they do, and they do a great job. But the idea that you could walk into this study planner not having known anything about the GMAT beforehand. What's on the GMAT? If I were to read this, I don't know. It doesn't actually say at any point in here the words verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, or data insights, which in and of itself means nothing until you actually break down what a data insights section is and what's within it. So we've got all of this like kind of generic statements of, read chapters 1 and 2 of the GMAT official guide to familiarize yourself with the exam structure. Okay, why wouldn't you like split this into different areas, right? The analogy that I've always used for standardized test prep is it's more a skills-based activity than an academic one. So you want to practice, and then you want to have actual practice exams, and then the actual exam. Training for a marathon. You don't run practice marathons before the marathon. This is asking you to basically run through 6 practice marathons before your actual marathon day. And if anybody's tried to train for a marathon, this isn't a 6-week process either. So those are the things that give me pause. It's not necessarily the message. It's definitely the messenger and the idea that they're presenting it as though this is a reasonable way to work through things. Because when we're talking about their own messaging, and I brought this up to you before we hopped on the pod, they actually have a tip here that says cramming is not as beneficial. And then this is basically cramming. So it's the contradictory nature of the message, the messenger, and even the test taker that I tend to have a little bit of issue with.
Well, it's interesting. What I would say,
I don't know what the heck I hit there. I clicked something and it went to pot there, but I have no idea what the heck that did. But nonetheless, that's my takeaway.
Well, and I guess I would push back a little bit. I think the other parts of their website breaks down the GMAT. They have materials you can download that break down and talk about the different sections. But I would say it was funny in looking at that document. It was almost like as you had said, it's a pretty good like marketing document for like a tutoring company, because it sort of gets you in and it makes it seem like, okay, I'm not trying to sell you tutoring or any particular course. You can kind of do it yourself, but then pretty quickly you would say, oh man, like I'm not doing well on these tests. I don't exactly know what to practice or how to practice, and then you would fire the tutoring company. But this is actually from the maker of the exam, which makes it kind of funny.
I mean, it's not necessarily. It's again, it's the expectations that it sets. And you saw me highlighting, and I don't know what the heck I clicked that made it go all squirrely there for me. But ultimately, there's all these practice exams just shoehorned in this thing. And one of the things that I always tell students is that you are looking to do an hour or so of study a day rather than trying to cram a bunch of time into your weekends. Because again, it's that analogy of building a skill. How do you improve a skill? You practice, and then you do it regularly. You will increase speed. And the thing that's more important to start is accuracy, not just going as fast as you possibly can. So this idea that let's talk about what I would agree with. Fully agree with the idea of taking a baseline, but why is my baseline not in week 1? My baseline's in week 2, so it's no longer a baseline because I've already learned a bunch of stuff apparently in week 1, theoretically. There's also this idea that we're immediately going to have another practice exam in every subsequent week. We're going to have a practice exam in week 1, practice exam 1. We're going to have practice exam 2, week 3, practice exam 3, week 4, 2 practice exams in week 5, and our final practice exam in week 6. That's just way too many practice exams. And this is something that is definitely more inside baseball. And I am going to be a little bit negative to what's being done here by the GMAC, is they're telling you need all 6 practice exams here. Each of these practice exams you can take twice in full and see entirely new questions. If you want to go through 6 practice exams, you only really need to have access to 3 of them, and only one of them would be paid. This thing is actually asking for you to buy 4 more practice exams, and you really only need 1 more practice exam in order to get through the rigor recommended by this pair of sheets, which is to get to 6 practice exams over the course of 6 weeks. Well, really 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, again, I guess we're sort of playing good cop, bad cop. There are some things in here that I like. I mean, it encourages the to do some of these in exam-like conditions, timed in a quiet place, and I feel like that's important guidance. One of the main things that I think happens to people preparing for standardized tests is they do, they maybe do a set of practice problems or a practice test, and they kind of like give themselves more time than they're going to actually have, or maybe they even like take a sneak peek at a formula or something, and then they tell themselves, okay, I do know how to do this problem, and it's just different under timed conditions, and you're not giving yourself a good read. And then like if you scroll down for anybody that's watching, it's so basic, but I do like the idea of just writing down the actual scores that you've gotten and some of the things that you're struggling with or doing well. But
it's a PDF. I'd have to print it in order to do that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, who's going to print it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is honestly what makes testing entities seem anachronistic is when they present something like this. Because if you actually use the interface of the actual practice exams, they keep track of your scores. They keep track of your time on every individual question. There is no reason at all that I should be printing this thing out and writing onto it physically. I mean, there just isn't. I can't edit it, and I'm scared of like clicking it because the last time I clicked it, it gave me a 404 error. But there's nothing that I can do to interact with it. I cannot. Oh, wait. Oh, hey, I do get a check mark. Okay, so I can get a check mark. I can't do anything to write down my skills or my scores, but I can check these things.
Well, and we're sort of picking on the document itself quite a bit, but I would also say, I mean, one tangent I would take off of this is the point about the 6 weeks. And I think like if you've just recently finished school or you're a particular type of person with maybe a math degree, maybe 6 weeks is not unreasonable. You kind of buckle down and you're diligent. But I would say, having done it myself and been a part of this tutoring company for well over 10 years, you're probably gonna, I mean, I always say like 3 months is like a good thing to think about, good timeline as a baseline, right?
It's kind of at the, I say 2 to 6 months of regular study. Now, regular study is the big caveat here, because what you just said, Mark, basically, if I'm not mistaken, you're assuming that they don't have any other job, right?
No, I mean, but to your point, 3 months, if you're working full time, that's still going to take some diligence, right?
Because each of these practice exams is going to take you 2.5 hours. And if you're going to do that on workday, you better do it before your workday. It's one of my primary recommendations across the board for all standardized test prep and really any academic activity if you are a working professional. Your day job will affect your ability to complete new homework in the afternoon, evening. If you wake up in the morning a little bit earlier, an hour and a half early, if you do an hour or hour and a half of study before your day job, you will not affect your day job at all. So it's a matter of when you do your practice. And again, I'm just looking, if we're thinking about this as a working professional's, guidance document, and I'm supposed to take 2 practice exams on week 5. I don't know when. I can do one on the weekend. I certainly don't want to do a practice exam Saturday and a practice exam Sunday. That is not going to give me enough time to really get all of the utility out of my practice exam and fully self-reviewing that practice exam, because that they do happily have a discussion of reviewing the results on each of these practice exams. But I am going to pick on week 5. I have no idea how I'm going to fit 2 practice exams in during a work week and be able to do my practice exam review and do dedicated practice on a specific section. It's just there's not enough hours in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, it really only works if this is like the only thing you're doing for 6 weeks. I guess it could work then.
I mean, and even then you'd have to split it up and you do, you're not going to want to take a practice exam of any standardized test with fewer than 2 or 3 days in between. it just doesn't do you any value, because you're just going to be cramming. You're not going to be taking the time to work through your process for each of the questions, really learning how to get the right answers and all those sorts of things. And again, I will accept your assumption that we've theoretically, if I'm the person who found this thing, I've already gone ahead and, read, I guess, the structure of the exam. But what I wish that they had done probably instead of this, but I know why they're doing it, is there's a reason that they're leading with this statement: prepare for the GMAT in only 6 weeks. That's their thesis statement, because they're trying to make it seem like something that is easily accomplished, unfortunately, which I don't think is the best approach for the test maker. Test maker should be talking more to the administration and saying the administration needs this test because it actually helps you determine who is qualified to go to your program, complete it, and then become a great MBA alum with networking benefits for future cohorts. But by doing this and marketing directly to the students, they're instead saying it's easy. Come on in, do it. And this is how you can do it in 6 weeks. And when you have somebody who is frustrated and discovers that it didn't work out in 6 weeks, I'm still at week 6 getting the same sort of practice exams as week 2 because I haven't allowed myself the opportunity to do targeted practice on critical reasoning in the verbal section, or exponents and radicals, or rates in the quantitative section of the data insight section. When you get to week 6, you're like, this wasn't easy. Let me go see if there's an easier route. And that's when you turn to the GRE, which is theoretically the easier content. But because of its changes that it made in 2023, it too has a really weird scoring curve that we've talked about before. And that's not going to be easier either. So it just encourages, not forces, it encourages people to go seek out an easy solution, as opposed to being realistic with maybe a 12-week planner. And if you talked about it from a professional perspective, like, have some breaks in it. Say that, for the first 6 weeks, potentially, you're doing just rotating practice on the 3 sections. So, maybe week 1 is something like, we're going to start with the basics of the content in the quantitative section, the basics of the arithmetic. Here are some practice drill sets that you could build out of our system. That would actually be helpful. Then we go into week 2, we start talking about the data insight section. Here's how data sufficiencies work. Here's how the graphic interpretation questions work, the multi-source reasoning questions work. And you build a little bit more of a curriculum. You do it in a more reasonable, again, maybe a 12-week structure, assuming that they're only spending an hour and a half a day to do it. That, in my mind, would be a more realistic thing. But again, it's interesting to me because the GMAC has always said that they don't provide the prep. They work, we've worked with them on different projects and that sort of thing in the past. But the idea that they're putting it out, you can do it in 6 weeks, I think is self-defeating.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird dynamic that you sense, which is like, from a business perspective, they're trying to encourage more people to take the exam who wouldn't otherwise take it. And I don't know, maybe they have some research on this and maybe there's something to that. But for me, I just have to imagine that there's a population of people that want to go to business school, and they're gonna take the GMAT. Maybe at the margin, you're winning over some people who were going to do GRE, but now are convinced that maybe the GMAT isn't so hard. But why not just be a little bit more transparent about sort of the kind of the dedication it'll take for 3+ months, to get the score you need, versus making it seem easy.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the problem here, is the amount of ambiguity that is built into the actual document's recommendations, right? So there apparently are online flashcards to familiarize with some concepts. I mean, if this was a link and it could take me to them, I'm pretty familiar with their website. I don't know where those are. We're talking about the diagnostic evaluation in the online question bank. Again, I know where that is. The learn about each section in the review chapters. Most people don't even know how to get to the book. The book is separate from the actual online question bank. It's an interesting dynamic that exists with the digitally delivered official practice materials at this time. But this idea of creating a custom practice set of easy questions, is it recommending that I do questions of all types and different sets? Am I trying to break this into the individual sections? There's more questions than answers that if I'm familiar with the exam at a limited level, I probably have after reading this, so like when we say start with the easy questions, how many should I be doing them in the structure of the like actual practice sections and the official sections themselves, wherein there's 20 questions for data insights, 21 questions for the quantitative, 23 questions for the verbal? How do I distribute them? Am I going to be doing tailored drills for specific areas of need? I mean, they do kind of allude to that, but this complete more practice problems based on your results, like which ones? Like what should I be doing with these? How long should the sets be? How many of them should I be doing during the course of a week? There's a good intention here, but again, I think that it ends up causing more confusion across somebody who would find this, who's never really thought about doing the GMAT before. And then they're going to do what all too many students do, which is they're going to take practice exam. And all they're going to do is take multiple practice exams and see the same score over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think in a follow-up video, it might actually be useful because there are, some of these things that are referenced, we could actually show what they are, how to get to them, how to use them. I don't want to do that now, but that could be a follow-up that we do. Go ahead.
No, there's a lot of different things, but again, like I just really question some of the things that they're talking about. Like, what is the difference between taking practice exam 4, which apparently requires exam-like conditions, and taking practice exam 3 and focusing on pacing in each section? I should be doing this for all of my practice exams. Does that mean that I can forget about pacing in exam 4 and exam 3 shouldn't have been under exam-like conditions? It's highlighting just little snippets of things that are intended. Again, I think the only message I'm getting from this is, hey, it's going to be fun and easy and you'll do it in 6 weeks. That's what I'm getting from this, as opposed to actually helping students utilize the materials the best that they can, which again gets me back to the idea of the practice exams. They don't even tell you that there would be a really nice, if you wanted to do it like entirely based on the lowest cost materials. Well, I can redo the free practice exams 1 and 2, and there's 4 practice exams right there. That's not here. If I wanted to get the best value out of their, I believe it's 90 question starter kit set of practice problems. Yeah, that'd be helpful, because now I can see, like, here's how I do each of the different question types. So it strikes me again as marketing materials more than anything else. And that, I think, comes through immediately, which I'm really curious as to, like, what is the point of this over here? Because again, I'm going to have to print this to actually use my exam day strategy. So it unfortunately feeds into the idea that places like the GMAC or the LSAC or the College Board or whomever administers these exams are just disconnected from reality, because, like, who's going to print this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some, I think it's too fast in terms of, like, it kind of implies like this is sort of the average 6 weeks, and I think that's too fast. And I think it's like good marketing for a tutoring company, but this is sort of more from the actual makers of the exam.
Yeah, it's got a level of authority that makes it seem like if I don't do it within 6 weeks, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, I agree with that.
That's not accurate at all. So the way that it's framed just is the main issue I have with it. I am nitpicking at some of the details within each of the weeks as they're outlined. But the biggest problem, I keep on, trying to highlight it here on the screen if you're watching the actual podcast, is it makes it seem like you're going to be able to prepare for the GMAT in only 6 weeks by prepping smarter, not harder. And if I'm not able to get my goals in 6 weeks, apparently I'm not smart.
Yeah. But, I would be a little bit more positive on average than you've been, in that, like, for a self-motivated person who is going to be diligent and put in the time and can, like, tinker around to find what they're referencing and how it works, it provides like a starting point to build a plan, but leave a lot, I think, to be desired. And probably the most important point that you've harped on is it sets the wrong kind of upfront expectation.
Yeah, I mean that's it. And again, like they even call out these are free practice exams. There really would be a benefit to saying, yeah, use the free practice exams twice, because you've got enough questions to do so within each of the exam question banks. So like there's just missed opportunities, because if you're trying to put this out there as and I think this is the goal, is as a self-contained, here's a planner you can use and you don't really need to go outside of the MBA.com ecosystem. Well, make sure you're using all of it as opposed to just some of it, and then immediately are going into, well, now I need to buy exams 3, 4, 5, and 6, even though I actually didn't.
I would say, though, just as a marketing plug, I guess, for our company, like, I didn't realize what you just said about being able to take these exams twice. I mean, if they have this many official current exams, and then you can take some of them twice, there's really no reason to not develop your own study plan using all official materials and get a little bit of supplemental tutoring help if you need it, versus, like, I know that we've also developed a course, but, versus opting for a course. So,
well, the reason you need a course is because you start going into the question banks and are like, I forgot how fractions worked, because obviously the quantitative section on the GMAT does not allow a calculator. So if you're like, I just am not all that, pardon me, you are not all that good at doing 26 times 90 quickly, because you don't recognize, well, I can just do 26 times 100, 2600 minus 26 times 10, 260, 2600 minus 200 is 2400 minus the extra 60 gets me to 2340, which is going to be 26 times 90. Those are the kinds of skills that are completely absent from this study plan. So you kind of have to come in, like you said, with that baseline of manual calculation ability, whether that's arithmetic or algebra. And then when it comes to the reading comprehension for the data insight section, and I'm especially thinking about the data sufficiency style questions, without an understanding of how they function from a process and execution perspective, and learning the theory of it, it's really hard to just be dropped into it. And that's what's happening here, is you're assuming a level of proficiency just in engaging with and understanding the content of the questions to be able to use this in the first place, because there is no real ramp up, with the exception of the very limited discussion of let's go read chapters, read the chapters, but we don't even really get into all of that ever again.
Well, and I will say, I guess I'll say this about my comments about the course. Like, the course we built, I think it has maybe, I think we did include like 1,000 practice questions, but the point was really not the practice questions. It was like the videos that explains the concepts and the strategies and the critical thinking. Like, you do not need a course that offers 15 practice tests and 10,000 questions. Like, it's actually possibly going to send you down the wrong path, because they're forcing themselves to write questions that maybe aren't like the real questions, and then that gets confusing. So there's more than enough official material once you're ready to take exams and do practice questions.
Yes, and the challenge, of course, is that trying to do anything on a one-size-fits-all approach is just not great. And like, the thing that I wish that any standardized test maker would do, as opposed to this kind of material, is marketing what the study will do for you beyond test day. So why do I want to learn what the GMAT tests? Well, because I'll tell from just experience, when I talk to prospective students and they tell me things like, I'm in consulting and I have to use Excel to do anything mathematic, I go, I don't want to work with you because you don't know numbers well enough. I want you to understand numbers. Guess what studying for the GMAT will do? It will teach you better proficiency of manually processing numbers and understanding things like how fractions work and exponents work and exponential growth and exponential decay, return on investment, rates of growth, rates of work, all those sorts of things are valuable. Same thing with like the critical reasoning style questions, the charts and graphs in the data insights section, the two-part analyses questions, and the learning how to use the tools at your disposal in order to problem solve and work through situations. These are absolutely abstract and theoretical, but they are applicable to some degree to what you'd experience on a, as a business manager or an executive. You'd have RFPs placed in front of you that you have to understand pretty quickly, and you don't have all the context. That's what the GMAT does. And I wish that they put forth a, study benefits document as opposed to a study planner that I think is setting those unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I think in some, it's sort of a counterintuitive way to think about it, but the GMAC seems to say, well, I know that most students are kind of stressed out, hate the idea of having to take the GMAT, so we're going to let them know it's not that bad. It can only be it only has to be a 6-week process. It could be quick and easy. And we might say, well, to get a really good score, it might take a really intense 3, 4, 5 months. But actually, you're going to be learning a lot of super useful things for your business career that is going to benefit you for a long time. So, treat it as an investment in yourself and a way to get the great score. Just like a totally different framing.
Yes. And it's that framing that is so important. And I mean, I have way too many students these days aiming for MBAs that aren't necessarily, to be perfectly honest, as diligent as I wish they would be, canceling, pushing out lessons, pushing out deadlines, and all those sorts of things. And I understand life happens. It does. But guess what? When you get to business school, they're not going to postpone week 4's lessons because, you're just overwhelmed. You're going to have to show up or you're going to be left behind. It's getting yourself ready for school. I mean, it's just the way that it works. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to re-engage that part of yourself to commit to continuous improvement, commit to maybe getting up a little bit earlier in the morning to do your homework before you go to work, commit to learning things that you may not enjoy just innately. So it's that part of the GMAT study, which again, compared to the GRE, the GMAT, everything on the GMAT is going to be relevant to your studies at business school. I've got a journalism degree somewhere in this room, but I cannot tell you why vocabulary on the GRE is relevant to any graduate endeavors with the exception of writing. Just don't know, but that's like half of their verbal section. And then they still have things like coordinate geometry and plane geometry, which again, not really applicable unless you're going into engineering. And even then you're going like way beyond what you'll find on the GRE. So it would be my recommendation if I had a magic wand to talk to the people at the GMAC and say, rather than trying to compete with the GRE on the level of, we're just as easy, you can do this in 6 weeks if you prep smarter, not harder, instead say, here's why you should want to spend more time on the GMAT than what you may think is less time on the GRE. You're going to learn by the GMAT how to engage with graphical interpretation of data. That's going to be important as you get more graphical interpretation of data and evidence when you're in business school and ultimately in the boardroom or the executive meetings. You're going to have to consider critical reasoning and argumentation based on just specific question tasks so that you can identify common assumptions in reasoning, identify common flaws in reasoning, understand how you can make your point better or attack someone else's position. Those are all going to be valid skills that will help you when you get to school. That's what I wish they would do a little bit more. And even things like the soft skills of just recommitting to a study schedule. I set it up so that every morning I wake up a little bit earlier and I do my 30 minutes of a 10 question drill of whatever type it might be. And then I commit to trying to do that in the evening, reviewing that work so that I get the full benefit out of the study that I'm doing. That I think would be a more honest way of presenting it, and it would encourage students and applicants to embrace the challenge of, of course, testing ain't easy, but the lack of ease is why it's valuable.
All right. Well, I think we should leave it at that, because I think we've made our point. And I encourage everybody to just, as Stefan was just talking about, think about these exams as ways to build like lifelong skills that will serve you for a long time, not just something to get through.